What's going on, fight fans? I'm back here with another video here set for you guys. Gonna be giving my recap and reaction to the UFC 319 card that just got done, and we had some absolute bangers, a lot of first round finishes in this one. And of course, we have the highly anticipated main event between Khamzat Ragdolls versus Dricus du Plessis for the middleweight championship belt. And the first fight that we start off on this card was, I believe, was the Ultimate Fighter finale between Alabi Idris versus Joseph Morales. Alabi Idris being from Kazakhstan, having that same type of build as Asu Amabayev, Isaac Maxim, with a little bit more dynamism on the feet, and knowing for to have those grappling, obviously, efficiencies that they have in that region of the area. And Joseph Morales is kind of a UFC reject that has had a time and a stint in the UFC beforehand, didn't really work out, and now is waking his way back into the UFC. And I mean, what an absolute performance by Joseph Morales. Whether it be on the feet, whether it be on the ground, threatening with submissions, he damn near got Alabi Idris out there in that first round with that RNC. And on the feet, he was just making Alabi look like an absolute fool in there. In the second round, Joseph Morales, as you can see pictured above, cinches in this triangle choke over Alabi Idris. And it was cinched in for quite some time. I'm looking and I'm thinking, like, damn, this dude Alabi is not going to lose for nothing. And eventually he taps out. And, I mean, just a star-making, well, not a star-making performance, but what a great performance to get himself back into the UFC, back into the great graces of Dana White and the brass of the UFC, and getting his way back, being the tough winner, and was a huge underdog on this one. I actually went with Alabi Idris, obviously with his undefeated record, from his background, where he's from, yada, yada, yada. I went with him because of based on how everything was looking. And shout out to Joseph Morales, man, had a great, best performance of his career, and is now contracted with the UFC. Now moving on up the card, we got what a lot of people are calling the robbery of the century, Garin Silva versus Dion Barboza. Listen, this is the way that you can only really score this fight. First round, 100% Diana Barboza won this one. Barboza was landing the harder strikes, was countering effectively, landed a good hook and a right hand in that first round, got the takedown as well, started the threat with the submission, and damn near got Garin Silva out of there, what I think with an armbar submission. So complete domination by Barboza in that one. Third round, 100% Garin Silva won. On the feet, she was a lot more aggressive. She was pressing and pushing the pace a lot more, landing the harder strikes. She had these positions where she was trying to be able to go into a Gogo Plata and then damn near cinched in that Darce choke that she put in, that ninja choke on Dion Barboza, had her in a lot of problems. And then Dion Barboza finished the fight just laying on top of her. But for sure, Garin Silva won that third round. The second round is where things get a little bit mixed up. There was a lot of in clinching. There was a lot of Garin Silva having the control and the underhooks at the beginning, and then Dion Barboza had the control for quite some time. Then it went to the ground because Garin Silva tried to be able to get a takedown, and she landed on her back. And while she is on her back, she's trying to be able to get this type of submission that I forgot that Joe Rogan said on the commentary. But she's like landing these ground strikes, and Dion Barboza's not really doing much. And then that type of submission or that type of thing that she was trying to be able to put in on Dion Barboza wasn't really working, so it got out of it, and then Dion Barboza pretty much just laid on her. It was a close round, right? It really could have gone either way. I guess Garin Silva won. I'm not really like tripping about it. A lot of people are all over the place saying absolute robbery. This was really bad. Dion Barboza should have won this fight. Listen, for sure she won the first round. It was very dominant. Third round for sure goes to Silva if you were actually watching the fight. Second round, I guess. If you really care about who won this fight, then you must have had money on it. But besides that, I understand. Because robberies happen. But this one was a typical 29-28 fight in a WMMA fight that was very close. I could have went either way. That went Garin Silva's way. Now moving on up the card, we got a pair of OGs going toe-to-toe, and unfortunately one of them needs to retire, and that is Edson Barboza, man. Drakkar Klose won this fight fairly easily. Edson Barboza, that first one was very competitive, but I went with Jakar Close winning that first round over Edson Barboza just based on it was the fight that what Jakar Close really wanted to be able to push on that pace, having it in the clinch, having it up along the fence, it being very muddy, not being on the outside, very technical with the striking and the kicks. Jakar Close was landing a little bit of the harder shots. He was landing that right hand consistently. It was absolutely money for him. He couldn't be able to get out of the way. That being Edson Barboza of that right hand. There were some good moments out of Edson Barboza. He would land a good left hook, a shot to the body, a good low kick every now and then. Well, in that first round, he did actually do pretty well. But in that second round, it was really dominant by Jakar Close. We need to be able to start testing our UFC fighters for their IQ because in that second round, Jakar Close really could have knocked out Edson Barboza in absolute spectacular fashion along the fence, but he just decided to be able to get into the clinch. This is really when Jakar Close is really starting to be able to get into his rhythm. Again, like I said earlier, he's consistently landing these straight rights, has Edson Barboza hurt badly, lands a couple of more short rights, and damn near, if he just doesn't press up on him and actually get into the clinch, he can land a few more shots in the pocket right there, and Edson Barboza is done for. Continuously overall, Close won that second round. The third round, Barboza came back a little bit stronger and did better, but it's overall like winning a round just to be able to win a round. He did pretty well, with the low kicks, and then Jakar Close landed some low kicks for himself as well. It was a close round that you could have just gave Barboza out of pity, but overall, those first two rounds for sure went to Jakar Close. And that's it, Barboza, man. Really needs to start thinking about retirement because there's not much matchups for him to be able to make up with, and especially in the lightweight division, unless you want to give him a OG fight like Jim Miller or maybe like a fight against King Green. But more than likely, they're probably going to give him to another prospect, unfortunately. And moving up the card, we got an absolute great underdog story. Not really. But Alexander Hernandez knocks out Chase Hooper in the first round. This one was a typical Chase Hooper being on his old head run where he's coming off wins against Borshev and Clay Guida and Jim Miller. Certified wins for him. And a little bit of a step up for Alexander Hernandez, who's also an old head himself, but is kind of on a 2-fight win streak before this one. And that first round, Chase Hooper was winning just based off volume. He wasn't really landing anything significant at least, or really to me, he didn't really land anything at all. He was just more busy, trying these like spinning back kicks, these spinning back fists, the jab, the 1-2. Chase Hooper is definitely not a good striker at all. He has worked on his striking. He looks like a hard worker in terms of him being in the gym and working on his striking, but naturally it doesn't come good to him. He tried to be able to get some takedowns, got stuff, and didn't really do anything with them with Alexander Hernandez. Hernandez was losing that round, but every now and then he would clip Chase Hooper with a pretty good shot, like a right hand down the pipe or like a straight little jab that would land, that would be more effective than anything that Chase Hooper was doing, but that was far and few between until Alexander Hernandez lands an absolute picture-perfect right hand on the button while Chase Hooper is asleep at the wheel, just throwing a lazy jab right down the pipe. Alexander Hernandez lands it on him, lands a couple of more ground and pound shots. A little bit of, I wouldn't say it's controversial, but the round almost damn near finished, and he had him hurt badly, and Jason Herzog called the fight off. Neither here nor there. There wasn't a big protest out of Chase Hooper out of that one. Alexander Hernandez now on a 3-fight winning streak as of right now, and coming off a good win over Chase Hooper, who was a prospect that was trying to be able to build himself back up and make himself an actual prospect and name for a lot of people to be able to see in that lightweight division. And now moving on up the card, we got the fight of the night, 100%. Jessica Andrade versus Lupi Godinez. I went with Lupi Godinez in this one just because that I just think that she's more better, technically clean on the feet, but Jessica Andrade has a chance in terms of pressure and her power that she has. And this one was just back and forth, rock'em sock'em robots for these two women. Lupi Godinez, shout out to her and her chin. Shout out to Andrade as well and her chin, because god damn, these women got some punishment on them. Lupi Godinez and her boxing was just way too clean. Andrade was coming in and pressuring way too much and not really knowing what to do with her distance, especially in that first round. Godinez what couldn't even be able to miss the target whatsoever. It was like throwing a hot dog down the hallway. God damn it. Lupe Godinez was just doing what she needed to be able to do. Also, like threatening in with some of the takedowns as well with Jessica Andrade. Andrade wanted nothing to be able to do with the ground. Second round, Lupe Godinez is doing the similar things, getting out ahead on Jessica Andrade. It's a little bit closer than what it was in that first round. Andrade is starting to be able to get her timing and her distance better, a lot better, and landing a few better shots. But overall, Godinez is doing the better work. And in that third round, Jessica Andrade has an absolute great round, landing the harder shots, coming on and pressuring better. Lupe Godinez showing her chin because, Jesus Christ, the punishment that she was taking and the shots that Jessica Andrade was landing was nasty. Vice versa, though, Lupe Godinez was still landing great shots, counter shots, coming back to Jessica Andrade's way. And overall, man, Lupe Godinez comes out on top on this one. This was an absolute back and forth war. In WMMA standards, this was an absolute war. Shout out to Lupe Godinez. Got the job done. It gets a nice victory over Jessica Andrade, a notable name that's, not the greatest, not in her prime, and she's on a losing streak as of right now, but a name just in general. And moving on up the card, we got another first round finish in this card. Mikhail Lechechuk versus GM3. This was an absolute it was so uneven and unfair on the feet. We even knew this, us hardcore fans. We knew this from the onset. Mikhail was going to dominate GM3 on the feet, however, was going to be able to go down. On the ground, it's a completely different story. GM3 is an absolute magician on there. And when GM3 is pulling guard, and he don't want to strike no more. He don't want to be able to be on the feet against Mikhail Lechechuk, who's not the greatest fighter in terms of it being on the feet, but he is a problem to be able to deal with. And Mikhail Lechechuk just took care of business, did what he had to do, got GM3 out of there, landed a few nice power shots, and GM3 looked like he was in there to just take his paycheck and get the fuck out of there. And I don't blame him. Mikhail Lechechuk just lands a nice left hand down the pipe, drops GM3, lands some nice ground and pound, and it was unfortunate because you kind of felt bad for GM3 to just be in there because he looked like a lamb out to slaughter out there, if we're being quite honest. And moving on up the card now, we got the new highly touted prospect that the UFC is trying to be able to push hard, Baisingar Surkaev. My goodness, the names that these guys have. Versus Eric Nolan. Shout out to Eric Nolan, man. Shout out to him. Like I was saying earlier about GM3, a lot of people that thought that he was going to be in there like a lamb out to slaughter. He came out there to win. There was a lot of exchanges on the feet between these two guys in the first round, besides Surkaev trying to be able to get takedowns. A few of them got stuffed, but eventually he did get some. But Eric Nolan, keeping it and trying to be able to have good grappling, not takedown defense, but just grappling defense just in general, fighting the hands, being able to get out of it, and keeping things on the feet where Surkaev looked pretty competent and pretty technical, but wasn't really doing much in terms of things like that. I mean, he just fought literally like 4 days ago, so, I mean, shout out to him for actually pulling this off. And there was a few strikes that he landed, especially like a teep up the middle right to the gut that I think hurt Eric Nolan. But overall, besides that, Eric Nolan was actually in there throwing some bombs, throwing some heaters, and he actually hurt Surkaev towards the end of that first round, and damn near looked like he was on his way to be able to finish this high prospect that the UFC, again, is trying to be able to push very heavily. And then we go into the second round. Surkaev then gets a takedown, does his thing, doesn't really want to be able to get anything out of the question in terms of the striking. Then eventually cinches in this RNC that's in there for quite some time. Shout out to Eric Nolan trying to be able to fight that out. But eventually he submits and taps out. Baisingar Surkaev, man, looking like he's one of those dudes. He said that he wants to be able to fight in September already. Dude's an absolute maniac. Absolute maniac wanting to be able to fight just that quick. That's like 3 fights in like 2 months. It's insane. But shout out to him. He's probably going to get another like can for him on his resume that he's probably going to be able to KO or get a submission over and be able to push over his hype a lot more for his career. And now moving on to the main card, we got an old head that I thought that was going to get flattened out stiff. Actually got the finish himself. Tim Elliott versus Kaya Sakuda. First round, Kaya Sakuda is doing Kaya Sakuda things. being very versatile and very unique on the feet, not having a worry in the world against Tim Elliott, who comes in with his very Aki and uncomfortable style. A lot of people think that DDP has an uncomfortable style or an awkward style. Tim Elliott is probably the most awkward fighter ever, if we're going to be quite honest. I mean, him just doing his thing on the feet, Kaya Sakuda not really worrying about anything that's coming his way until Tim Elliott got a takedown towards the end of that first round. And then once he got that takedown, the momentum just completely shifted. Kaya Sakuda was a lot more reserved. He was overthinking, I think, everything. He didn't want to get into any type of exchanges anymore. Tim Elliott started to be able to land a lot more strikes in that second round. And eventually, Tim Elliott did get another takedown, started to threat with some submissions, and eventually did with that, I don't even know what kind of choke it was. It looked like kind of like a guillotine. Tim Elliott, man, somehow, some way, not somehow, some way, but submits Kaya Sakuda. This is the second time he's been submitted in the UFC. 100%. Grappling is his deficiency. I mean, if you lose to submission to the champ Pantoja, 100% understand it. But Tim Elliott, off like a 2-year layoff, hasn't been in the UFC or in the octagon for quite some time, is an elder dude, and is kind of that litmus test of like, can you be able to get over him and really go into the flyweight rankings and really show and prove yourself? And Kaya Sakura couldn't. He really couldn't. His grappling and his BJJ is very much so a deficiency. And really for him now, it's only striking matchups, if we're going to be quite honest. Or maybe they throw him in against another grappler to really show and prove himself that he can be able to be a better grappler in the future. And moving on up now on the card, we got Jared Cannonier, being the absolute biggest dum-dum in the world. If you're going to strike with MVP, you are going to lose. I said this in my prediction video. I went with Jared Cannonier stupidly. You cannot outstrike MVP. There's nothing you can do against MVP if you're the build of like a Jared Cannonier, thinking that you have at least a chance against an MVP. The distance, the range, the control that he has, his speed, his movement, his footwork, you can't. You just can't. It's not going to work. The only person that has a real chance on the feet with MVP is Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. And he's on an absolute losing streak as of right now. He's in the 170-pound division. MVP said that he doesn't really matter about going from 185 to 170 or 170 to 185. He can do both. Obviously, now with this win over Jared Cannonier, Cannonier I think was like 8 or 9 ranked in the middleweight division. He's probably going to take his spot or maybe like be 7 or 8 around there. If you don't take down MVP, you're not going to win. And Jared Cannonier actually did in that third round where MVP was a little bit over-aggressive. He went with a 1-2. You try to be able to catch him coming in down, and Jared Cannonier timed it perfectly, getting a double leg takedown and controlled the rest of the round, landed some ground and pound, and did some good work. If you would have did that, right, in like earlier in the fight where you're shooting for these double legs or you try to be able to get some takedowns and have things on the clinch and on the fence against MVP, couldn't be able to do it. I mean, what do you train for, brother? That's what you need to be able to do against MVP, and MVP dropped them twice in the first and second round, completely making Jared Cannonier look like an absolute fool. He didn't even throw any kicks. He didn't really throw much knees or any elbows. He just did it with his fist. That's like a complete outclassing, unheard of in a very long time. A lot of these fighters are very, very stupid. Very, very much so stupid. Very idiotic. Very dumb. Very, like, I don't know. I don't know what to say. It is very, I'm not going to say it's easy to beat MVP, but the game plan is out there to be able to do what you need to do against MVP. But a lot of people get their egos into it. They get their pride into it, similar to how, like, when Alex Pereira was on his streak knocking everybody out, everybody was like, I'm going to knock out Alex. I'm going to go in there and KO him and show and prove that I can knock him out. No, you're not, dude. No, you're not, dude. You're not. Same thing with MVP. You're not going to go in there thinking, oh, I'm going to go out there and outpoint or get a knockout against MVP, or I'm going to outstrike him and make him look like a fool. It's not going to happen. Every single fight that MVP has been in, even the loss against Ian Gary, he's outstrucken every single person. Kevin Holland didn't have a chance. Ian Gary, who's a highly touted striker in the UFC, didn't have a chance and had to resort to grappling to be able to beat MVP. Sharon Magomedov, one of the better strikers in the middleweight division, probably one of the top 5 strikers in that division, had nothing to be able to offer against MVP, and now a highly ranked guy like Jared Cannonier, who has a basis that can grapple a little bit and is known for having power in his hands, and he can strike. You don't have a chance to get MVP, brother. You really don't. You really don't. When will these fighters learn? Anyways, moving on up the card, we got Carlos Prates getting the job done in the exact same fashion that I believed he was going to be able to get it done. A highlight KO on his resume, and for the Fighting Nerds resume just in general, that completely puts the rocket right back onto him. I mean, Carlos Prates versus Jeff Neal. Jeff Neal had his moments when he was pressuring. He was doing pretty well. He was going in and moving forward. But Carlos Prates, with his footwork, just being elusive, getting out of the way, not really wanting to be able to get into a striking exchange with a powerful puncher such as a Jeff Neal, trying to be able to possibly get himself knocked out. Once Carlos Prates started to be able to get into his rhythm, landing hard low kicks, once he started to be able to get into that boxing range, or Jeff Neal wanted to be able to get into that boxing range, and Carlos Prates is landing this knee up the middle to the body, he's landing his 1-2s, he's landing his left hand, he's starting to get into his groove, and it's starting to look very much so like every single other Carlos Prates matchups that he's had against every single other person besides Ian Gary in his career so far in the UFC. And we get a highlight reel, and I mean highlight reel walk-off KO, spinning elbow right on the side of the head, right on the temple of Jeff Neal, stiffs him out. I mean, maybe you could have gotten another follow-up shot, but there was nothing to be able to see from there. Jeff Neal gets put out cold, and a step up for Carlos Prates, calls for himself to be on the UFC Rio card that's going to be headlined by Charles Oliveira, which is a fight night which is going to be absolutely insane, and he calls out Leon Edwards. Absolute great matchup to be able to see from there. I think that one is a banger, but I don't know if he's going to be get a Leon Edwards as of yet. Maybe we'll get another welterweight ranked for Carlos Prates. Maybe, I don't know if they give him a Michael Morales, if they do a prospect versus prospect type of thing. But that would be a banger matchup to be able to see in Rio. But if he's co-lining and we do get Leon Edwards versus Carlos Prates, 100%, even though Leon is an absolute great technician and is great with his distance management, I think eventually Carlos Prates could be able to get him out of there. And if he does, he gets a former champion knocked out cold, where usually in the fights beforehand that Leon's on this losing streak as of right now, he's gotten absolutely demolished on the ground, but he's never really gotten finished on the feet. That would be absolutely different and something way ahead of its time that we've seen from Leon Edwards, especially how he is on the feet. He's very, very much so defensively responsible in terms of what he does, unless you're talking about him being in boxing range. And now, moving on to the co-main event, we got back-to-back highlight reel spinning elbow KOs. And in the first round as well. Never done before in the UFC. This was absolutely peak prime hype. Lerone Murphy gets the job done versus Aaron Pico and possibly solidifies himself as the number one contender now to be able to go against Alexander Volkanovski for the featherweight championship belt, undefeated in the UFC, and an absolute tear from where he's gone so far, beating guys like Dan Ige, Josh Emmett, and now a dude that's hugely represented by the UFC and giving a lot of praise of how he's been coming in, a Bellator type of Michael Chandler sort of fighter that's built into this mold of how he is. And Aaron Pico from the onset just bringing on this pressure, just moving on forward like nothing is phasing him, landing a nice right hand that kind of stumbles Lerone Murphy. And while Lerone Murphy is kind of wobbled and off balance, they get into some clinches. Aaron Pico is trying to be able to fish for some takedowns. He gets control with a few of them, but really is just pressuring hard, landing these nice left hooks to the body just over and over. His boxing looked pretty well established. But then, as soon as Lerone started to be able to see that every single time that Aaron Pico is trying to be able to get into exchange, he comes in crashing and lunging in with these shots that he's throwing. He landed a nice elbow right down the pipe on Aaron Pico before he got that KO, a straight line elbow. And not only the straight line elbow, but a nice knee up the middle that I thought landed right on the chin of Aaron Pico, but landed more on the chest of Aaron Pico. And just a beautifully timed spinning elbow that absolutely slumped Aaron Pico out cold stiff. If you thought the Jeff Neal one with Carlos Prates was absolutely nasty, this was disgusting. I mean, what a knockout. What a star-making knockout in a co-main event spot. 3 weeks to just be able to establish this one for Lerone Murphy. They were trying so hard to be able to get a matchup for Aaron Pico. They wanted to be able to do that with Khamzat Ragdolls. I don't even know if Khamzat Ragdolls was going to be able to do something like that on the feet against somebody like an Aaron Pico. I think Aaron Pico's pressure on his boxing is actually really good. But with him coming in that hard, pause, and having his hand down, not worrying about what's coming back his way, and really just trying to be able to get a knockout and having his hands that low in a moment like that against a highly ranked dude, you're bound to be able to get caught, dude. So there's probably going to be a lot of fights that Aaron Pico is going to be in that's very entertaining and fun, similar like to Michael Chandler. I think he's going to have a career like that. But he's not going to be like a hugely high title contender. If you're going to get knocked out by somebody like Lerone Murphy, no disrespect to Lerone Murphy, but Lerone Murphy is not a knockout artist. He's a technician, a tactician, somebody that's well-versed in every single thing in terms of the MMA verse. And Lerone Murphy, man, again, just putting his name on the map. People went from, this dude is absolutely boring. He didn't want to go into war with Josh Emmett. He's making things looking whatever in his footwork. He's running away from the fight. And now he gets the spinning back elbow against a highly touted dude that the UFC was propping up very much so, glazing him into another oblivion. And he gets the job done. And more than likely, if they don't give it to Khamzat Ragdolls, who I think is rightfully deserved of it, but Lerone Murphy now has a high case, especially with Alexander Volkanovski also voicing his opinion, saying that he wants to be able to see Lerone Murphy in December. So more than likely, that's probably going to go down. And now to the main event, we have the highly touted bout for the middleweight belt that has been getting a lot of hype for Khamzat Chimaev finally to be able to go for his first ever title championship shot against Dricus du Plessis, who has been on an absolute run in the UFC. And man, did we get an absolute snooze fest. A snooze fest that was fucking horrendous. I mean, all-time high horrendous. This is the same crowd that was cheering and yelling every single time that Khamzat Chimaev was saying something on the mic during the press conference and booing Dricus du Plessis heavily. Throughout the entirety of the fight, Khamzat Chimaev was getting booed. He was not getting the same type of acclaim that he was after the post-fight interview that he had with Joe Rogan. But shout out to Khamzat Chimaev. He is dominant, man. He is dominant. There is not much to be able to say about him. Dricus du Plessis did not have an answer for the grappling whatsoever. He had his moments. There was times where they would get stood up and he would land a hard strike. Or in the 5th round where he was able to get stood up by Mark Goddard, and he landed a few nice shots. He stuffed the takedown. He got the back of Khamzat Chimaev, threatened with a submission, landed some elbows every here and there. But Khamzat Chimaev just obliterated him, put him in the crucifix position like 98 times. He hit him with like 3,000 punches or 3,000 strikes. Not heavy strikes, but hit him with 3,000 of them. whether it be elbows, punches, kicks, Khamzat Chimaev completely annihilated Dricus du Plessis on the ground, where it was just embarrassing on the point. I mean, I did pick Dricus du Plessis, so obviously I'm going to be pissed about it. But it was just to a point where, we're thinking about Khamzat Chimaev and maybe his gas tank is going to wane and we're going to get a finish. And, shout out to Dricus du Plessis. His BJJ defense in terms of not allowing a choke to be able to get cinched in at all was on point. So he wasn't going to get submitted at all throughout this entirety of the fight. So he did really good in terms of that. But in terms of the takedowns, the control, the overall presence, just wet blanketing, Khamzat Chimaev did absolutely that. And it was boring. It was very boring. Very much so. I mean, shout out to him. Great performance to Khamzat. He did what he normally does. If he doesn't get a finish, he just dominates you with control. That's pretty much it. He shoots in for those takedowns. And if you don't have good takedown, or if not good, if you don't have phenomenal takedown defense, like elite takedown defense, there is nothing for you to be doing. Because if he doesn't submit you, he's going to control you, and he's just going to win the round. On the feet, Khamzat had his moments every now and then. He throws some good kicks, especially some good low kicks, some good head kicks every now and then. But in terms of strikes, in terms of violence, in terms of entertainment, in terms of wanting to be able to see Khamzat Chimaev again, no, there's none. Really. There is none. And I have this pictured above with Anthony Hernandez and Kyle Barajo, who are going to be the next contenders, trying to be able to come up. Also, Reiner de Ritter, Nasruddin Imavov. They're the true next contenders in the middleweight division to be able to go against Khamzat Chimaev. And yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. Anthony Hernandez has a great gas tank and he has good wrestling and good grappling, but is he at the level of an athletic freak like a Khamzat Chimaev? Barajo is good, but is he great? Imavov, I think, has the best chance because in terms of his stature and what he's able to do in terms of his grappling. I mean, he's from that area and region as well, but he's not shown to be a Khamzat. Reiner de Ritter has a funky style, is a better grappler and wrestler compared to Dricus du Plessis in terms of technique and skill. But on the feet, he's worse than Dricus du Plessis, but he's okay. I mean, he got that knee up the middle. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think the middleweights in this division are fucked. Yeah, I think that it's a wrap. I think it's GG. I think it's GG in the chat. I don't think there's much. And the thing is, on the feet, Khamzat is not insane. If you're on the feet with Khamzat, you have a chance. You can be able to get in some strikes in and do your thing, potentially hurt him. I think Dricus du Plessis landed some good hard shots against Khamzat in that 5th round. So if you're able to keep things on the feet somehow, some way, you have a chance against Khamzat, 100%. Especially if you're grappling and your BJJ is similar to a Gilbert Burns where you go into your guard and you really have to make Khamzat work. I don't think Khamzat Chimaev is absolutely invincible. I really do not believe that. But if you don't have good takedown defense, you are either going to get submitted or you're going to get controlled until your life is done. That's essentially what's going to happen. That is, from now on, every single Khamzat Chimaev fight, that is the question to be able to answer. And if you can't, you're fucked. And if you can have good takedown defense, but your control time to be able to get up from those takedowns and trying to be able to fish your way out of it, or you don't have good BJJ and you can't be able to get out of those areas where he's trying to threaten you with those chokes, there's nothing that you can be able to do. Khamzat is a monster on the ground, and he can go 5 rounds, but I mean, there wasn't really much that du Plessis did, really. So there wasn't no pushback on him. Maybe if he did have some pushback on him, He would have gotten more tired in this one and really shown his gas tank ability. But yeah, Khamzat is the new champ. And yeah, we're back to having fights that are really disappointing to be able to see, because the entertainment value is just gonna probably be at an all-time low, pretty much. Unless you're a grappling fanatic, unless you love submissions and wrestling is your thing, and you like to see guys cuddle up along the fence, for a long time, and you like to see guys getting kneed in the thigh or in the butt or in the rib cage every now and then, and you just have a fetish for guys getting taken down and they can't be able to get up and they're trying and they're struggling their hardest. If that's your thing, that's your thing. But no, I'm not. I am not moved. I am not moved whatsoever. So yeah, Khamzat is a monster. But I don't know. Hopefully, I don't know. I really don't know. Like this video if you obviously like this video. Comment your opinions on this UFC 319 card. I think this card was absolutely like a banger, 100% a banger. Besides, unfortunately, the highly anticipated main event that was very much so a downer. It is what it is. And subscribe. Subscribe if you're here because you like it here, you love it here, you want to stay here, and you want to stay longer. Why not? Thank you guys again for watching again, and peace.